Our next speaker tonight is Mandisa Thomas. Mandisa is the founder and president of BlackNonbelievers, Inc. She has spoken at secular conferences and events and has promoted the group's agenda in media outlets. Mandisa has made interview appearances in media outlets including CBS News, NPR's Code Switch podcast, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Free Thought radio program. She has been profiled in publications including Jet Magazine and Playboy, and has written opinion pieces for outlets including CNN. Mandisa founded BlackNonbelievers Incorporated in 2011 as a nonprofit secular fellowship. Its goals include eliminating stigma, increasing visibility, and providing support and networking opportunities around non-belief in the African American community. The organization's leadership is mostly female and includes LGBTQ representation, and it has affiliates in 10 US cities. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mandisa.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here, and thank you to Tom for his wonderful presentation. Thank you also to the Skeptics of Middle Georgia for inviting me. Thank you to everyone in this room, and also everyone who's watching online. Can't forget about y'all. Thank you. So I absolutely love giving the backstory to the title of this talk. I am originally a New York City native, for those of you who aren't aware. And in addition to my having a pretty secular background upbringing, which is pretty uncommon, I'm also a huge hip hop fan. How many of my hip hop heads, are there any hip hop heads in the house? Good, good. So I might be dating myself a little bit. I'm 44 years old. And I originally, the concept for this talk started in 2017 with the faculty advisor of the Sacramento City College's Secular Student Alliances group. And so as we were crafting this presentation and the tour that I did, I came up with some titles. And one was based on, how many of you are familiar with Public Enemy? Yes, good. So you know they have an album called Fear of a Black Planet. So the title of this talk is Fear of a Black Atheist. You may have seen it before, but I do tend to give variations of this talk every time I give it. So it's always good to see it in person, see it live. And it was so pertinent for a number of reasons, because one, given our current times, given our current climate, it does seem like not only the United States, but the world does have a fear of a black planet. But also too, with the rising number of the non-religious, and also with the work that we have to do within our own community, there seems to have been a fear of Black atheists. And so with that, we're going to get right into it. First, again, just a bit more about myself. I am the founder and president of BlackNonbelievers, born and raised in New York City. I was raised in what was called the Black conscious community, which is another reason why Public Enemy is, and their music and their message was so powerful and so relevant, and it had a very huge impact on my upbringing, as well as how I organize and how I view things. At the time that BlackNonbelievers got started, I was working full-time at the Centers for Disease Control as the event services manager. I transitioned to full-time activism going on 3 years ago now. And in addition to my work with BlackNonbelievers, I also currently serve on the boards for American Atheists and the American Humanist Association. I also volunteer with Recovering from Religion. And while I did not get into this movement for awards and accolades, I am proud to say that I was named the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association's Person of the Year in 2018. I was the recipient of the Secular Student Alliance's Backbone Award in 2019. I was also named the Freedom from Religion Foundation's Free Thought Heroine that year. And last year, I was the co-recipient of the 2020 Harvard Humanist of the Year Award, along with Sikibu Hutchinson. If you are not familiar with her, I highly recommend that you become more familiar. And also author Ijoma Alua. And this is important because, again, people often ask, well, why stress Black atheists? Why do we need to talk about, why do we need to differentiate, or why does there need to be? So first, I want to say that we do exist. There are those of us here from the Black community who actually openly identify as atheists, or who have questioned their beliefs through evidence and through their experiences, and who have left religion behind. And while we are still smaller in number, we are growing, and you can see it represented in this room. Not as much as what some would like to, but yes, we do exist. And I do want to quote from a Playboy article from 2018. This was a gentleman who was a former pastor. He attended his first convention in Oklahoma City, which was the American Atheist Convention that year. And to quote from the July-August 2018 article, Among the Atheists, he says, "The most encouraging moment of that convention weekend comes when I introduce myself to Mandisa Thomas, president and founder of BlackNonbelievers, an organization dedicated to support and visibility for Black atheists." So now we're going to go back into why this is important, because it is. Excuse me. So in order to understand why the focus on Black atheists and also other atheists of color is important, we have to understand why religion defines the Black community. And it goes back to because the numbers support this. Approximately 79% of the Black community, and I think those numbers are probably higher, identify as religious. Now we are talking about the Black community making up 12%, approximately 12% of the US population. The number of religiously identified is about 80%, which is disproportionately high, even though the number of religious nuns are rising. And this is due to, when we talk about survival, Tom talked about survival in his presentation. Slavery in the United States of our African ancestors pretty much forced the enslaved to accept Christianity in particular. And it was more of, if you didn't accept it, you died. So, and most of the major religions, the Judeo-Christian religions, why they are so prevalent is because that is the primary way they were forced. So it wasn't because they had their own traditional beliefs, but they were forced, in addition to accepting, the oppression, not even accepting the oppression, but that was an aspect of having to endure the enslavement in this country. So we have to, and that is very, very important as to understanding why there is a higher number of religiously identified Black folks, especially in the United States. But even though this was the case, the Black church, which in areas like Macon, Georgia, is probably very powerful, it became a primary sense of support once slavery ended and institutionalized racism was enacted and enforced. There were a huge number of historically Black colleges and universities that were founded through churches. And so, yes, there was a foundational support with the Black community, especially once Jim Crow laws were started, and also once many in the Black community were disfranchised through terrorist groups like the Ku Klux Klan, especially here in the South. So the church became that sense of support for a lot of people. However, with this knowledge and with this understanding as to why the church and religion in particular is extremely prevalent within the Black community, we do contend that it has been a crippling agent. Now, I personally am anti-religion. I'm very much anti-religion because, and you can go to Pew Research to verify these numbers. But we contend that religion has crippled our community, and we are in the midst of Black History Month, right? Just started. And so religion and Christianity, the identity, has hijacked the image and the representation of the Black community. How many of you are familiar with Dr. Carter G. Woodson? Okay, only one person. And this is why this talk is so important. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who was a Harvard graduate, he was an African-American historian during the time of the Harlem Renaissance. He famously wrote the book, The Miseducation of the Negro. He is the founder of Negro History Week, which became Black History Month in the 1970s. The fact that only one person in this room was able to identify him speaks to the problem of the education and the information that is missing regarding freethinkers, especially coming from the Black community. Because the concept of free thought, humanism, and atheism is nothing new to us. We've had these same questions, compared and contrasted the evidence. However, when it comes to the culture of our community, these bits of information and the trajectory is often obscured and even dismissed. So there is, and this isn't just important to Black history, it's important to American history. So when we talk about the miseducation of a lot of folks, there are many who have been. And also it ignores how Blacks became predominantly Christian in the first place. Like I said, it wasn't because people wanted to accept it. And it really does. We charge religion and Christianity with being the primary agent of white supremacy. This is something that we cannot ignore. And when we talk about racial injustice, we talk about economic injustice and how the Black community has been who's bore the brunt of that, we cannot ignore this. And it severely diminishes the critical thinking process and reinforces dependence on a savior and a divine entity, which is a problem. So even though there were humans, there have always been humans that have fought against injustice, there have been many, especially within the Black community, who have just put it in the hands of God and who have just prayed about it and who said that a savior is going to come for us. And this has been a problem for us. And we have to speak on it. It also perpetuates homophobia, sexism, hypocrisy, etc., etc. Black women make up the majority of membership in the Black church. But as we know, religion and Christianity in particular, and the other Judeo-Christian religions are very, very, very anti-woman. They are very, very anti-LGBTQ. And this has played a huge role in the problems that we have within the Black community. It also overlooks abusive actions that are committed by religious people and their leaders. We can certainly look to the Catholic Church for this, but we can also look no further than to the late Bishop Eddie Long up there in Atlanta, up in DeKalb County, who was the former bishop of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church. Now, he came under fire for carrying on inappropriate relations with young men in his church. Ironically, though, he, a few years before that, he actually led a march protesting same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships. And what did his parishioners do? Even though there was talk, there was critique, they still forgave him because why? He's a man of God, even though he sufficiently committed harm against these young men. And again, the people who are harmed by these people's actions, this should not be ignored. Also, it takes money from the community but doesn't sufficiently give it back. I said before that the Black church is a very, very powerful institution. There are reports that the Black church collectively has generated over $400 billion, which makes it one of the wealthiest institutions within the Black community. Now, granted, again, we give the credit to some religious institutions for starting educational institutions. And yes, we can give some credit to the church for establishing community, but at what cost? Because as we look at health statistics, as we look at economic statistics, the Black community is still on a very low end. And with the church generating that much power and that much money, we have a serious problem. And so this is something that, again, we have to speak on. And it also keeps people in fear and isolation and seeking help and solutions that are needed. It is only as of recently that the Black church has started addressing sufficiently the issues of HIV and AIDS and other health disparities, also mental health. Oftentimes people are, again, told to pray on it. You got demons in you, instead of sufficiently seeking clinical help and actually seeking solutions that could benefit our communities. The church does not have the monopoly on fellowship. They do not have the monopoly on any of these things that could benefit us, but they certainly like to take credit for that. And also too, if you are a person of color, and if you are certainly someone who was Black, there was I'm not sure if you saw, there's a video available of a Black woman stating that she could not believe that I, as a Black woman, had the nerve to identify as atheist in front of white devils. Yeah, let that sink in. So not only do you have your beliefs questioned and your perspectives questioned, for many of us, we have our Black identities questioned. And let me tell you, we may be able to hide our atheism. We may be able to, we don't always have to disclose that, but we can't hide the fact that we're Black at all. And so to have those identities questioned based on misunderstandings of atheism and non-belief in humanism, that adds extra added layers that some of you folks in this room will never have to go through. That adds extra added challenges, and also in understanding the other institutional factors that people of color and other marginalized groups have to go through. That makes it that much more of a challenge for us. But guess what? I wasn't raised to bury my head in the sand. I was raised as an activist. So therefore, it was in that spirit, for lack of a better word, and in coming to terms with my atheism, and also having other people confide in me that, guess what? They didn't believe either. And also after attending an atheist meetup within the Atlanta area, and facing a number of challenges, being one of the only other Black people in the room, we decided to start BlackNonbelievers. And as you can see here, we are celebrating our 10th year in existence this year. Thank you. So we aren't just an organization that sits around and just say, hey, we're here as Black atheists, we exist. I am an organizer, not just at my heart, but what I do. So like many other organizations and many other groups, We do help bring people together because guess what? I can tell you more often than not that I have had a number of people come to me and say, I thought I was the only Black atheist out there. I thought I was the only one who existed, and I'm glad I'm not alone. And I know that many of us as atheists in general feel that. So there was a need to build community among us, and also providing that space for those who understood specifically what it was like to come out of religious belief, and also to face that being in the midst of the Black community. And so while we host a number of activities. We host social events, we have guest speakers, but in addition to that, we have also contributed to research and content, building of content from the Black atheist demographic that more people need to be aware of. So for example, how many of you have ever heard of Candace Gorham? Okay, so if you aren't familiar with her, she is the author of the Ebony Exodus Project, which debuted in 2013, which discusses why some Black women are walking out on religion. She compiled a number of stories, mine included, and also research into religion in the Black community, the toll and effect it takes on mental health, and also why it is that much harder for more Black women to leave the church. So I highly recommend getting that book. It is available on Amazon Prime. I usually give this presentation with a PowerPoint because I like visuals. I don't just like to tell you. I don't like for you to just take my word for it. I actually like to show what I'm speaking of. But also, in addition to us holding and building up our community base to help more people find each other, to increase that networking base, we have, as stated in the introduction, we have done interviews and appearances on a number of media outlets, which for some of our members initially they were almost deathly terrified of that, because like many other atheists, there are quite a few who are in that closet and they were afraid to speak up and say something publicly. However, when you have such an overwhelming presence of religion within Black culture, which it is, and there is a fundamental misunderstanding of atheism and non-belief, it became more important for us to speak up. And so that's what we've been doing. We have been profiled by CNN, by CBS Sunday Morning, by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and a number of major media outlets, and also smaller ones as well, because it became important for more people to see us. Not just within the Black community, but also within the secular community, because there's always a question of where are all the Black atheists, right? So it became important for us as an organization to help bring more of us together, to tell our stories, and also contribute to the evidence and research that we know is out there. So we are more than just an organization some of us come together, we commiserate, we talk about what we go through, but it also extends beyond that. And so some of our current and also previous programs and initiatives, I'm proud to say that over the years, we have collaborated with a number of organizations, but last year we launched our very first billboard campaign, which we call the True Liberation Billboard Campaign. And we have bumper stickers that show the message is simply free yourself from religion and find true liberation. We also instituted our Being Changes Lives campaign in 2017 because over the years of building up community and connecting with folks, we have had members who have stated not only has our organization changed their lives, but we have also saved them. Now, again, I don't have a savior complex. I'm not a messiah. I'm not here to save the world. But if just 1 to 2 people, or if our members feel that their lives have been changed by our existence and also the community we provide, then we'll take it. And so we We started collecting testimonies, for lack of a better word. It isn't a religious word, but we've had some folks who have expressed they've talked about their journeys out of leaving religion and also finding our organization and how it has been beneficial to them. And in addition to that, last year, we also co-sponsored the very first Zora Neale Hurston Scholarship along with the Secular Student Alliance, which does benefit Black college students. So we do make sure that we try to pay it forward for those who are coming after us. We also do try to develop a leadership pipeline and also a speaker pipeline. For those who could benefit from more exposure. So, our purpose as an organization is very, very multifaceted. It is very multi-pronged, and I'm very, very proud of the work that we do. And so we're going back to the question of, are you really an ally? Because again, I'm often asked to speak about diversity and inclusion. What can our groups do to attract more people of color, more students, at a time there was more women, but now I'm seeing here that there is more of an equal representation of women in this room and in other events, which is great. Other aspects are still lacking, especially when it comes to people of color. So I'm going to briefly discuss some don'ts and do's for allyship. So I would like to say, please don't assume you can't help. Please don't assume, just like any other Black organization or organizations that have a focus on racial justice, it is very important that you don't try to exclude yourself from the equation, because these are issues that affect all of us. So please don't assume you can't help. And please don't assume that you can't answer any questions regarding this. Of course, it's always better to defer to those experts, especially those of color, who are, who focus on this specifically, but don't ever assume you can't help. Also, don't assume that we all care about the same issues or even think alike. The Black atheist demographic is just as diverse as anyone else. Now, there are some Black atheists who love to debate. There are some Black atheists who love to push that envelope. There are also some who would rather, just kind of live and let live, get along to go along, and that's fine. Also, it is, don't assume that because we're Black that we care about all racial justice issues equally, or that we all think the same about them. We have always been diverse. The Black community has always been multifaceted and always had different points of view. And it should never be assumed that any of us can speak for the entire Black community. Heck, I don't even speak for all Black atheists for that matter. But there is a tendency for non-Black folks and non-people of color to assume that the very few people, Black folks, the very few Black people in the room can speak for the entire community, and don't ever assume that. Please don't dismiss the importance of our groups. Again, as I stand here and discuss the specific challenges that face the Black community, and especially the Black atheist demographic, one of the worst things you can do is show a lack of understanding. Now, yes, scientifically, technically, there is no such thing as race scientifically, but it is a system that was put in place, especially during enslavement. And it was also a system put in place that classified those and that were meant to oppress. And so these are systems that we cannot deny exist, and that we actually have to acknowledge for the purposes of what we do. And so it is important to never dismiss it is important to never dismiss us at all. Also, please don't become defensive when we discuss our concerns. Now, there may be a lot of there are a lot of issues outside of the science and evidence that pertain to communities of color, especially as we discuss, if we talk about economic injustice, racial injustice, and such. And there's no way of getting around this. White supremacy has hurt all of us. It has hurt all of us. And we cannot stand here and talk about these issues without bringing it up. We have to talk about how these issues have affected all of our communities and actually, in some ways, have prevented progressive measures and aspects of advancement. And so when we talk about Eurocentric ideas, and also when we talk about white supremacy, we're not saying that any one white individual is responsible for all of this. However, some of your ancestors might have been, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So this isn't something that you should become defensive about. It is important that we understand what the problems are and how we can move forward. So, and also, please don't say I don't see color or race, because what you do is you're basically ignoring racism and its problems. Yes, it is very insulting. It is very condescending. And finally, please, we start dreading well, I don't understand why all these Christians are Black in the first place. It's important to do some research and to get a better understanding as to the historical and institutional factors before we start blanketedly asking these questions. But I don't like to end this on a negative note, because there are a lot of things that can be done, which is do listen and learn, and also do your due diligence. Do some research, but do listen and learn, especially from those of us who have jumped in and who are speaking from the Black experience and from our, and listen to our perspectives. Do listen and learn from us. Also, do adjust your attitudes and actions when presented with new information. There may be things that you didn't realize you were doing before, and that might be offensive to someone else, or that might have been dismissive or condescending. So, as a community that prides itself on education and information and evidence, and also learning from it, what do we say? When we know better, we do better. And that's exactly what we should be doing. Also, do make sure that we are sufficiently part of the input. So it's more than just trying to get more people of color and more Black folks into your seats. It's also about retaining them and retaining us, and also making sure that your leadership does reflect diversity and inclusion. So that is very, very important. Also, make your content and programming diverse and relevant. How many times can we sit and talk about the problems of religion in our communities at any given time? So, as atheists, as humanists, as non-believers, there are other things that we are interested in. We are very multifaceted within ourselves. This doesn't have to be the only thing that defines us, even though I contend that it is a very important part of our identity, and it is nothing to be ashamed of. But as folks who are supposed to be more enlightened, especially once you leave religion, our programming and our information and what we do can reflect that. So, and not even just within Black History Month. Now that you know that there is more content out there, there are more, there are more things that can be discussed and more things that can be worked on. It's good to make that relevant especially to the people who are in your area. That may draw them in a whole lot more. Also, do collaborate and participate and make them more than just one-time efforts. So if there are other organizations within your areas that you have common ground with, that you may be able to collaborate on events with, do that. You know, be proactive, take that initiative. And it may be difficult. It may be a challenge at times. I know I've certainly been frustrated with trying to collaborate with other organizations and sort of being rebuffed. You know, it happens, but it's important that you show that there are other, especially for those of us who are very passionate about reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, sexual health, all of that. If there are other organizations who have those focuses and you can work with them, please do that. And again, be routine about it. And also have information and resources available for those who may be looking for organizations like Black Nonbelievers or other secular organizations. It is important to have, the best thing we can do is to, again, point folks to other organizations that they may be interested in addition to your own. And also, last but not least, do donate and support. I know that many folks who have left religion behind have also been liberated from this idea of having to give to your church on a regular basis, but any or all organizations that have a community purpose need support, and ours is no different. And I will say Black Nonbelievers is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and donations to us are tax deductible. We also have merchandise that we sell to raise funds. We also host different events, and so these things help with our work. And as the organizers here know, to put on events costs money. To have the ability to communicate and to connect with the world, it takes support. And it doesn't take, and I don't think any of us ask for you to give us 10% of your money. Even just a few dollars a month or even a few dollars a year makes a huge difference in the work that we do because we need it. And so also for those who, this is why I love having visuals, because I often have folks say, well, I'm not Black. Can I wear a BN shirt? Absolutely you can. And I don't care who has a problem with that. For those who are watching, you can support our organization however, if it is available, then we encourage you to support. And so here are just a few references, and there may be some questions during the Q&A. But I highly encourage you to look up Sakibu Hutchinson, who I mentioned before. I also encourage you to research Jeremiah Kamara. Some of us are familiar with him. He has 2 documentaries on Amazon Prime. The first one is called Contradiction, A Question of Faith, which was released in 2013. The second is called Holy Hierarchy, The Religious Roots of Racism in America. I highly recommend watching those documentaries. They are available on Amazon Prime. And also Black Freethinkers, A History of African American Secularism, which is a book by Chris Cameron. It is on sale for Black History Month on Northwestern Press. And I will have more information about where you can find these individuals very shortly. So I'm going to read, in conclusion, a quote from one of our members. Before seeing that video of you on YouTube, I really thought I was the only Black person who didn't believe in a God. I then logged onto Facebook and found your organization, Black Nonbelievers, Inc. The joy and relief I felt seeing and meeting so many Black people who were skeptical or outright didn't believe. Thank you for being an inspiration and bringing visibility to atheism/secularism in the Black community. It is so needed. Now, once again, I will continue to emphasize that I am not an agent of trying to convince people that they should leave their religion. As much as I have a problem with it, I will contend that where my passion lies is definitely helping those who felt they were alone, who thought that they didn't have a place where they could go. And building community amongst fellow non-believers, especially as our numbers grow, is important. And our ability to be able to convey our position unapologetically and openly. And sometimes saying, I don't give a damn what you think. They said, I'm an atheist and that is okay. Even with the stigma that still surrounds that word or that term. Becoming more comfortable, helping people, first of all, to become comfortable within themselves with that identity. Because for some, it is often a painful journey. Sometimes we lose family members and friends, and sometimes we still do fear losing family members and friends. But there is a way for us to rebuild. And there is a way for us to continue to connect, mostly with each other. But the more we express, the more we become more comfortable with our terms, with our identities, and the more we continue to network and build our communities, and also lead by example on how to be better human beings. We will help to eradicate the fear of atheists. We will show our secular communities that there is more diversity than people think. There are more people doing the work, and they should be supported. And so with that, I say thank you, and let's continue to build and work together to erase those fears. Thank you.